Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mixed Space Book Club, where stories spark connection. We're so grateful that you're all here with us today. Our mission at the Mixed Space is to empower individuals of mixed and intersectional identities to develop, embody, and actualize their full selves by fostering meaningful relationships across social, professional, and romantic spaces. And this book club is exactly a way for us to do that, to foster meaningful relationships, ask questions, and explore what challenges us, what strengthens us, and ultimately what makes us feel the most seen. So every book we choose explores themes that bring our mission to life. They're themes of identity, of healing, rupture, but also wholeness, and what it means to live in love, all in the in-between. So thanks for bringing your voice, your presence, and your openness to this moment. Myself, I am Lily Alice Walker Stiefel. I am your host here today at the book club. And I'm the founder of the Mixed Space, and I identify as Black and mixed. My father is of Sierra Leonean and Honduran descent, and my mother is of German and Irish descent. I'm bilingual. I'm multicultural, I'm multi-continental. I am based in Accra, in Ghana, the land of the Ga people. And I like to share my matriarchal lineage that was introduced to me by one of my mentors, Tanya Pinkins. And that goes like this. It says, I am the daughter of my mother, Linda, who is the daughter of her mother. I called her Nani, who is the daughter of Florence. And I want to honor my father's mother, which is my grandmother, Grandma Gail Wilhelmina Cabral, Carol Walker, my auntie Carla, my auntie Kim, and my cousins, all my female cousins who are now also mothers to their own children, who have supported me and raised me and who continue to pour into me. And my people overall, like I've mentioned already, are from Germany, Ireland, New Orleans, definitely Creole, and the larger African diaspora. And now, I would like to introduce the star of the moment, TaRessa Stovall, who is an award-winning journalist, author, and cultural critic whose work has been exploring race, identity, and belonging for decades. She is the author of 9 books across the genres of memoir, fiction, and cultural commentary. Her writing has been featured in publications like The Forward, USA Weekend, and Madame Noir. She was born in Seattle at a time when much of the country was still racially segregated, and her parents' marriage was illegal in 16 states. So from the very beginning, identity wasn't theoretical to her. It was something lived, something navigated, and something she had to define on her own terms. Her memoir, Swirl Girl, Coming of Race in the United States, USA, traces that journey, which is deeply personal, but it's also set against the backdrop of major cultural shifts in the United States, civil rights era, and even more recent moments in the racial reckoning of this country. And what makes the book so powerful is that it doesn't simplify identity. It really sits in the tension, the pressure, and the ongoing process of self-definition. So TaRessa has described herself as a Black power flower child. And that spirit really does come through in her work. She's honest, there's resistance, and there's also humor and reflection. And she continues this conversation through her Substack. Check it out, Mixed Auntie Confidential. Go and follow and read her stuff. She's really smart, it's really well written. And she writes about mixedness, identity, and everything in between. Bold and unfiltered are the words that I would use to describe her voice. It's such a pleasure to have her here with us today, not just as an author, but someone who's been shaping and contributing to this conversation long before it was mainstream. So please join me. I'm clapping for you, TaRessa. Join me in welcoming TaRessa Stovall to the Mixed Space Book Club, where stories spark connection.
A land and labor acknowledgement of the Muskogee Creek people, whose land this is and whose land we are on. And it's a complex history for those of us who also have African American ancestry, because the Muskogee Creek people did own African American slaves. So like everything else, it's multidimensional and multi-tiered. And so we honor and acknowledge the contributions and the agency of all of those ancestors and those intertwined and always complex and bittersweet histories.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. That was great and very good to hear. Bucci Bear, welcome. Love to have you. You can put in the chat if I'd love to have you introduce yourself. Those of you who are new here, just introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where you're located at the moment. And if you have a land acknowledgement, please share. I'm in Accra, which is the land of the Ga people. And I absolutely recognize the Ga tribe and their history. And I'm grateful for being here with them and learning from Indigenous tribal knowledge and wisdom, and the way that it impacts my life. And it really, it's a blessing to be able to be here amongst the people.
He mentioned that they had promised one of the daughters a dog if they won, but one of the daughters was allergic to dogs, and so they couldn't just go to a shelter. They had to get, I don't know, Labradoodles. Forgive me, I'm not an expert on non-allergic, hypoallergenic dogs. But he had a whole thing, and then he said we couldn't just go to get a shelter and get a mutt like me. And when he said a mutt like me, I threw the poor dog. I still remember the dog was sleeping. I threw the broom across the room. I was like, hold up. Home Slice did not just, no, he didn't. I sat down at the computer. I don't know what I started writing. So the real seed for the memoir, I was like, okay, I have to write something. Like everything in me was screaming at the highest pitch. I don't even know if I went to bed that night. I was outraged. I wanted to call him up and go, you just, what, sir? No. But anyway, I was done. So that was really a catalyst. Now, I didn't start writing it until a few years later, when my ancestors, who I work for, and all of them, they're just all one big group. They work together to boss me around and to help me and to make my life better. But they were like, yo, it's time for you to write that book. And I had other things, novels and things I wanted to write. They were like, yeah, that's really nice. No, you gonna write. Like this is what the conversations were like. You gonna write this book right now. This is the time. Now. Nothing else. Forget the fiction and everything. You will do nothing else until you do this book. So that's what happened.
Wow. I have goosebumps. Not your ancestors being like, that other stuff is cute, but you're not doing anything else.
That's just how they talk to me. And I would come home at 9 to 5 the whole time I was writing. I come home and, one day I was like, just, had my dinner and was chilling, watching something on the TV. And they'd be like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm chilling. I worked all day. I just had dinner. They're like, computer, go. Like, literally, y'all. They were not letting up till this book was done.
Oh my gosh. The goosebumps. I love hearing stories like this because it really helps me as a younger person still on her journey, doesn't have kids yet. And I'm luckily out of that phase in my life now where I'm questioning everything and feeling like a quarter life crisis of like, have I done it right or what's happening? I feel like relatively settled and relatively confident and can have like a 5-year plan. But it's nice to know that what's for you really won't miss you. Like
we will not miss you.
Your people will tell you that
they will shove you in the front of the thing on the road. Because I'd be wandering. Even when I was writing the book, took about 4 years. I think of that. I'd have another creative idea. They were like, back here. It's like, get your homework done before you watch TV, that kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah, cool. You said 4 years. Okay, so what was that process like for you over the course of the 4 years? Did you want to get it done faster? Did you put pressure on yourself, or did you just kind of let it flow?
I did not put pressure on myself. This book, so I've written and have published fiction, nonfiction, been a journalist, all the things. I've been writing my whole life. But this book and the fact that it was memoir absolutely kicked my behind every step of the way. And I've, been through this process. So the process wasn't new or unfamiliar, but memoir was new or unfamiliar. And unlike some people who I totally envy, I don't keep a journal. Right? If you ever plan to write a memoir, start keeping a journal. Okay, because it'll make it much easier. I didn't have journals. I did have a lot of my mother had saved everything I'd ever written. I had a lot of rambling, semi-coherent things about being mixed that I'd written all throughout my life. And I had those, but they weren't organized. They wasn't like a journal. So I did have those to draw on. I didn't pressure myself time-wise. I knew that it had to have, and it was hard for me to write a memoir. It was very, very difficult for me to write it. What helped me, well, first of all, I have to shout out, my alpha reader is my daughter, TaRessa Stovall, who was an undergrad when she first looked at a couple chapters and gave me amazing feedback that caused me to stop for 6 months, completely restructure. She gave me homework, assigned books for me to read, all that kind of thing. And I did it. She is now a literary agent and a published author. But this is back when she was a teenager. But so she was my alpha reader. She was my first reader. And she was like, no, the way you're starting isn't working. You need to do this. Right? So kudos to Mariah. And then I'm a big fan of beta readers. I use beta readers a lot for books. So I had 2 rounds of beta readers. They also lovingly, constructively kicked my behind and made the book better. But it was really hard because in memoir, you're writing yourself, but you have to be able to see yourself as a character. You have to find some kind of balance between objectivity and subjectivity so that you're not just indulging whatever and making people read it or hoping people read it. You got to make it readable. Like I said, to strangers who don't know you or like you, but they might find the topic interesting or something about it interesting. And so I was very aware of that challenge. It was super challenging. What helped me was having both journalistic experience and fiction writing experience. And so those both played very heavily. I structured it somewhat like a novel on purpose, but used journalism, reporting, interviewed people, did a lot of fact checking, all that. But it was very, very hard. It was very, very challenging.
Wow. Thank you for sharing all of that. It's also making me think of how you've said in the past, very clearly even, that being mixed doesn't automatically mean that you're confused or lost or tragic. So how did that perspective or opinion factor into your objectivity versus subjectivity?
Well, I've always been offended by the whole tragic mulatto thing. And again, I'm blessed. First of all, I was in that jazz baby, kind of curated community. But my mother herself really did pretty much everything right in raising my brother and myself in terms of raising mixed children. And it's possibly because she grew up in a very diverse environment. She grew up with Black people. And, and again, she was Jewish, but before Jews had assimilated into whiteness. And so I give her a lot of credit. But in terms of, so I always felt a strong, I never felt, bad about what I was. I understood it was complicated in the world and that I was going to have to figure out how to navigate all that. And sometimes it felt like a lot of work, and sometimes it felt like more work than I wanted to do. And it was often very frustrating because, again, back then we didn't have all the language and terminology we have now to help us frame the context, contextualize things, really get into the nuances like we can do now. Those tools didn't exist. Things were very basic, right? Almost feel very prehistoric compared to now in terms of just conversations or things like that. I was around a lot of other mixed peers, other mixed children. We never talked about being mixed.
Like I tried to have a conversation once when we were young adults and they all just looked at me and said, "What is there to say?" And I'm like, "Okay, I'm sorry. I thought we could have a conversation, you know." So I was trying to do all that, but in terms of the tragic and all that, I always clap back against it. Because to me it was insulting and I understood historically. So it's one you're understanding historically. I mean, in the United States and in much of the diaspora that was created through the transatlantic slave trade, the first mixed Black people who existed were all created from rapes. Period. There were no consensual relationships in the beginning.
Yeah.
Right. So the origin of at least mixed Black or mixed Black white or whatever else, whatever other groups were in the other places in this diaspora is inherently complex, inherently bittersweet, and inherently laced with trauma. And that
Yeah.
can't ever be ignored or denied. I know for younger people who have only ever been alive when most mixed relationships obviously come from consensual arrangements, right? That's hard. And it's really hard because it's ugly and it's terroristic but it is the origins, again, throughout the diaspora for people whose African ancestry came through that route. And so, and that's a lot of what defines at least being mixed Black in the world.
Yeah.
You know, and then again, in the US tends to dominate in some ways these conversations. And so again, then you had the people who were mixed. And I just did a piece on my Substack, y'all. I want you to read it, talk about let's stop processing mixed identity by the numbers. And I share the categories that were used for enslaved populations once mixing started. And we're used to, and yes, these are now trigger words and slurs, but we're used to terms like mulatto, quadroon, octoroon. There are actually, and I shared them from a book by an expert, there are actually 8 categories, and they're in my Substack, 8 categories of racial, down to 1/16 Black, down to possum blanc, which was basically no discernible Black blood. You could pass as white, but you were still a slave. Or you were still designated. So, I mean, yeah. So all of that, again, not in the United States specifically, but not just. So the public kind of tragic mulatto, which I know the US loves a tragic mulatto, and I think a lot of the world does, or a lot of the white world does. Because of course the tragedy is you're so close, but you can't ever really be white. That's the tragedy, right? Um, there was a movie called The Human Stain, right, where the stain was Black blood. So, I mean, all that mess, all that racist mess, anti-Blackness. But that's always defined mixed Black identity. And then people who are mixed but not with Black, I think often rightfully feel, kind of shunted aside or not. Why aren't we centered? And my response to that is, it's not that you don't deserve to be centered or black, white always dominates, but because, again, the US and much of the Western world is built and still runs on a black, white binary. And so that, there's always going to be a special level of charge, I call it, right? Racial charge. If that's your mix, then that's more racially charged historically, politically, sociologically than, if you're a more, if the different groups you're mixed with didn't enslave each other, there was no enslavement, no colonization, no war, no overtaking or oppression, then you don't have that level of horror in it, right?
Yeah.
It's hard. So I think a lot of how mixed identity, but we're now having these conversations. We're now able to bring in other mixes, other groups, and decenter a little bit, I think, if that makes sense, the whole tragic mulatto thing. But the concept still, people are still very much in love with it, including a lot of mixed people, but especially monoracial people.
That's really interesting, the monoracial perspective on the tragic mulatto archetype. Because I've really only been exposed to it from the mixed race perspective. I've not, I don't really know if I've been sensitized to it that much from a monoracial perspective, or especially like folks who identify as white.
because also I guess
Well,
I never
white,
felt like
black, anything, yeah.
yeah. Yeah. I also never felt like it was tragic that I wasn't white. So that was like, yeah, but
Exactly.
yeah, it depends on who you ask. I want to just draw our attention because we're nearing towards a point where I would really love to see if we can read an excerpt of your book. It's part of our tradition to read, to have 10 minutes where people just get to close their eyes and turn off their cameras and just listen to a part of your book.
That we can do that, Swirl Girl.
Yes.
And
Holding it.
the excerpt I want to share is not 10 minutes long. It's not that long, but
Okay.
I want to share it. I want to share it because it represents the essence of not only why I wrote the book, but why I do this work, right?
Yes.
But why I do this work because but why I do this work. And that's what's important to me, you know? That is what is
Okay.
important to me. So give me 1 second. Okay, here we go.
Take your
It's
time.
not super long, but to set it
Okay.
up, this is the essence of why I do this work, So, all right, you ready? You can close your eyes.
Yes.
You're in Seattle. It's the 1960s. I'm integrating a white middle school across town and meeting a new classmate. She's Black American, presumably Christian. She sizes me up, then hits me with the inevitable question. Well, what are you? Mixed. With what? Black and Jewish. She paused and then she shakes her head. But you can't be Black and Jewish. Those two things don't go together. I said, well, no, I'm Black and Jewish. She said, no, you can't be. You can't be Black and Jewish at the same time. She said, because Black people are Christian and go to church, and Jewish people are Jewish and go to synagogue, I said with a sigh. Yeah, yeah. So you can't be both at the same time. So I paused and looked at her and thought it over. And, it kind of made sense in the sense of if all the Black people she'd ever seen were Christian and all the Jewish people she'd ever seen were white, then I could see how she felt that way and why I was kind of an enigma to her. But still, I was proof that it was possible. And then I realized with a little bit of sadness that the only other bluish person I knew was my brother. We knew lots of other mixed kids, but nobody with our specific blend. I brushed away the rush of sadness at that revelation and stood to face my classmate. I can be Black and Jewish because that's what I am, I said slowly. If you don't believe that, you can't be my friend. She stared at me for a long time, then nodded once, and we never discussed my identity again. So that incident ignited the spark that fuels the work I do today, because nobody should ever feel invalidated by anyone's lack of knowledge or exposure. Do you want another excerpt? Talk to me. Y'all want more? I don't know where Lily went. Okay. So that's really, that incident really is why I do this work, because I don't ever want anybody else, any other mixed person to ever feel or be invalidated. And even if it's understandable why the person is telling them you can't be what you are, that it's something that I believe I'm here to try to contribute to challenging or ending in some kind of way.
I'm so struck by how you were able to pause for a moment and reflect on what she's actually saying and think about, okay, well, if she's never seen a Black person in a synagogue before, or she's never seen a Jewish person I guess you can't see a religiously Jewish person in church, but that she didn't even also know that Jew, like being or identifying
as Jewish is not only a religious identity, but it's also a cultural and a historical identity. And so there are folks who identify as Jewish who are Christian, essentially, who don't really go to synagogue. And it takes a lot for kids to, I mean, kids don't really know that, you know, how would they if they've never been exposed to it? So for you to be able to take a step back and really think about it, because me, I would have just been mad. I would have just screamed at her. I grew up with very emotional parents, so I would have just been like, "Ah, ah, ah." I wouldn't have had the reflection at the time.
Well, thank you. Well, it was interesting because I thought about it, and like I said, I was like, "Oh, wait, I can see," because, and also because I wasn't, I was in Seattle, not New York, LA, or Chicago, where you have
Mhm.
very large, influential Jewish populations, and places, especially like New York and Chicago, where sometimes there were also Black people in those Jewish populations. LA to a
Right,
lesser extent, but Chicago and New York are known for those things. And
right.
so, again, I was like, I hadn't even ever seen, and that was when I was like, I don't even know anybody else who's Black and Jewish, right?
Yeah.
Um, so okay, but let's be clear, you're not going to invalidate me.
So did you guys become friends or no?
Yeah, we were cool.
Okay. Okay. Nice. She was like, "Okay, cool. I get it. I respect your boundaries, and we don't have to talk
Yeah,
about this again."
yeah, and I think too she understood I wasn't like I didn't process it like an attack. I didn't like it,
Right.
but I didn't
Right.
process it like a personal attack. Like, what are you crazy? Now I've done that with other
Yeah.
people. Don't get me wrong. I can be very feisty, but that one, it was the energy behind it too. Like there was a
Yeah.
bewilderment, which is going, you can't be. And there are people now who say that. Let's be
Yeah.
very clear. 100
Right.
years later, there are still people walking around with, you can't be Black and Jewish. Jews can't be Black, blah, 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 blah. That's not uncommon.
Yeah, even though, like you said, the community has grown and other people have written and published books about it. There's Instagram pages about it, and still some people just have not received the message, really.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I want to invite others who are here listening in, Lisa, Mikki, Nina. If y'all have any questions, anything you want to say or respond to after this time of hearing TaRessa speak and share, you're welcome to put those questions or thoughts in the chat, but also we would love to have you click on the little hand wavy emoji up on the right corner, and then you can actually turn on your microphone and you can ask the question yourself in your own words, or even just respond to anything that we've said so far. You are invited, as we say. While I'm giving people a chance to really think about how they might want to come and join up here. Uh, I have a couple more questions. Um, I am wondering how, the story that you're writing, it unfolds alongside major moments. Hi, Mikki. Major moments in US history from civil rights movement and then also more cultural, more recent shifts. So how did writing the book connect your personal story to that larger story of the country?
Well, that's a great question, and thank you. That was easy because from the time I started thinking about my story, I realized I couldn't tell it outside of that context. I couldn't
Mhm.
tell it outside of the context of what was going on and how, the US was going through, in some ways, one of its first racial reckonings. One could look at it that way. And at the same time, I'm coming of age, so is the US. So again, what you had is you had the civil rights movement, and that was geographically in the South, but of course, we were aware of it. In the North, you had led by younger people, the Black Power movement, Black Liberation movement at the same time. And so that was much more present. I was much more exposed to that directly. You had that going on. You had protests, young people for the first time protesting a war. So you had protests against the Vietnam War. We still had a draft, which we're apparently gearing up to have again, unfortunately. But anyway, so we were aware of young at the time just men being drafted, our peers, our boyfriends, our brothers, our cousins, etc., being drafted into the military. Whether they wanted to or not, in a war that for the first time, there was internal dissension in the U.S. about fighting. So all of those
Right.
things were happening simultaneously. White women the whole feminist movement was rearing its head in a much more public way. All these things were happening simultaneously, all at the
Yeah.
same time. And the
Yeah.
U.S. was, again, the racial reckoning was very intense. I mean, racism was racism. The police killings were as rampant as they are today. They haven't stopped
Yeah.
or let up. And so often there would be riots in predominantly Black communities and neighborhoods, right? And then, of course, the real inciting incident at a bigger level was April 4th, 1968, when Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated, right? And that's so my book begins on that day, right? My
Okay.
book begins on that day, Thursday, April 4th, 1968. Um, and I take you through an ordinary day until the evening when we found out he was assassinated, and then the response to that, my response to that, and then my school's response to that, which was very dramatic. Um, so that's how the book starts. So yeah, I realized that you know, you I couldn't tell my story absent the context in which I was living, in which it
Yeah.
happened. The story happened in that context, and I couldn't separate them, nor would I have wanted to. Because
Okay.
processing it that way and putting in the book that way helped me to better understand it and have insights into why I developed the way I did.
Yeah. And it really also highlights one of my personal challenges in navigating conversations, even in publicly, is how intrinsically history, geography, politics
Oh,
are interrelated to the way that we're building our relationship and our own identity. And I think so often in these taglines and these social media posts, there's so much that gets left out or erased even, and then people feel like they can't grasp their actual experience or they can't really talk about it. Yeah, because a lot of the context and perspective is missing. That's integral part of what you're trying to explain or what you're trying to process, what you're going through. It's not just the individual emotional experience. It's so much more.
exactly. Very, very well put. Yeah, you can't separate any of it. It
Yeah.
all works together, and that's what informs who we are, how we see ourselves, how we move through the world, and how we process all these things that are happening.
Yeah. Mikki, I'm going to let you talk. Thanks for coming up on stage.
Hey, Mikki.
Welcome.
Hello, hi. Thank you so much, Lily, and thank you, TaRessa, for sharing. I'm just so encouraged by especially your story about the ancestors, your ancestors like telling you like this is the book you need to read. And I think it's such like a yeah, such an encouragement and an inspiration to know that we do have stories to tell because I think to what you both were just speaking on is only your experience and what you know firsthand can give life to a story that is very specific and nuanced and takes into context all of the different things because I think oftentimes we like we'll see a character in a book or a character in a movie that just feels like they were just like plugged in there because it's like, oh yeah, we'll sprinkle in a mixed person because that's trendy or it's, and yeah, none of the context exists. And so I think it's amazing that you are sharing a story that only you can tell and you don't have to, yeah, like and thinking about the question of that girl being like, well, that can't be true. It's like, well, you exist. It is true. Our truth is real. We live it every single day. Because it might not make sense to people or because it might be new to them doesn't negate the fact that like we're here, we experience life the way that we do. So I think, yeah, I'm just like very encouraged by you being a storyteller and allowing it to be told in the timeline that it was supposed to be told and trusting that timeline. Because I'm someone who, yeah, kind of like questions whether I do have certain stories to tell, but now I know, oh, I do have them. I'm just maybe not there yet. So thank you so much for sharing.
Well, thank you. I just want to say and thank you for reminding me because I hadn't thought of this, but you may touch on a really important point, Mikki, which is that one of the main reasons I wrote the book, outside of the fact that, I was forced to do it by my ancestors. One of my motivations for writing the book, one was, so people don't have to feel invalidated or get invalidated, or they can push back when they are. But the other was exactly what you said, is so that everybody tells their stories, that stories beget stories beget stories. And what's so beautiful about where we are today and technology and everything is there are so many tools and ways to tell your story. It can be a book, it cannot be a book. It can be a video, it can be so many different things. It can be a podcast, it can be a collage of things, multimedia, whatever you want to do. The barriers to entry are gone. The tools we have to explore and to express ourselves are so vast and so exciting and so open. So I want all y'all to tell your stories in whatever way works for you. There is no one way, there is no right way, there's no wrong way. So I want to thank you for reminding me that really what kept me going as this book was kicking my behind the entire time I worked on it was I hope somebody reads this and is inspired to tell their own story. That really was a very, very big priority for me.
Well, thank you so much. So consider me inspired. I can't wait to read it.
I can't wait to see yours. Thank you.
Yeah, right. Because Mikki was our book club author for last month, and we read her children's book, which is called Cake Mix.
That's right,
And
Mikki.
yeah.
That's right,
And
Mikki. I'm going to be featuring you. That's right. I need to reach out to you on my Substack. Okay, sorry, y'all. Go ahead.
Yeah.
But also, like you're saying, I mean, there's more books to come, there's more stories to come, there's more genres even to come. And that's what's also very inspiring to me. There's
Yes.
Substack, there's
Yes.
children's books, there's memoir, there's fiction, there's articles, there's
Everywhere.
voice recordings. Yes.
Yeah, all
Yes.
y'all
And
get your stories out there. Let's just flood the world with our stories, our perspective. And Mikki said something else too that's really exciting to me. It's a pet peeve of mine, Mikki. Ooh, and you articulated it so beautifully, where they just drop in a mixed character, y'all, and we're sitting there. Wait, I mean, yes, I want mixed representation. Yes, I want more jobs for mixed actors, actresses, right? When it's a screen story. But so much of the time, y'all, am I right? I mean, that's a whole nother, you can hold a whole salon on that, Lily. But when it's not done right, and when you can tell they just kind of shoved them in at the last minute, or contextually, they don't handle it with the nuance that it deserves. Oh, pet peeve. But it also keeps me writing and it keeps me motivated to keep creating.
yeah, and it's so unfair because it's not like you don't have people who you can base it off of, or you can have a consultant come in and actually color
Or a
in the
writer,
character.
get somebody in the writer's room. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. It's not like we're not here. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I want to close out with looking towards, to some extent, the future, also looking at this conversation, this question of what's next, because we had our drinks on Discord on Tuesday. So it's really cool. We get to have two mixed space live events in the same week. And one of the big questions that was asked is like, what's the next conversation? If we're trying to get over this constant cycle of being a victim, or having it like staying in that place of the horror, and we're looking at the next generation who's also, from what I've seen, they're reclaiming the word mulatto. There's so many people that are like proud mulattoes, and they're building groups around it. And so what do you think about the youth and their vocab and their approach to the mixed conversation, and what would you like to see happening next? Like what's your vision for evolutionizing this conversation?
Great question. I have to laugh about the word. So, mulatto, as we all know, mulatto is probably, out of all the terms, again, the ones we're familiar with. Well, let's just go Negro, mulatto, quadroon, octoroon are the ones that are well known, right? Coming from enslavement categories. Um, Mulatto is probably the most loaded, politically charged word. It is in the context of Black and Black mixed people and conversations. It's it's a weapon only slightly less nuclear than the N word, depending on,
Yeah.
that's a whole nother conversation. But I always describe the N word, especially when it's used by white people, as basically a nuclear weapon. It's designed to annihilate. So mulatto is very charged. Mulatto is, on the one hand, I mean, it's super controversial. You know, the origins, you know, a donkey and a mule, da da. But in some, I guess, Caribbean and Latin American society, it's still used it's very neutral. It's used just, mulatto, mulatto, da 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 da, right? Of course, in the US, it's at this point, you're basically risking your life almost, but just by using it. I mean, it's so loaded, it's so charged. Possibly most of you are aware of the rapper Miss Mulatto. I think her name is Alyssa Stevens from Atlanta, who won a rap competition. I don't even remember what the name of it is anymore. Years ago, and she came out as Miss Mulatto, and she's mixed, she's biracial, and she achieved a level of fame. And of course, if you're going to have a hip hop moniker, it's probably good if it's a little controversial, right? But anyway, she's very savvy. She managed it. She got a lot of pushback, so she dropped it. Now she's Lotto, or Big Lotto, even though she's physically very tiny. But that was an interesting thing to watch in real time, and watch how different generations of people responded to it. And she's probably the most public figure we've had in a while, who's like, hey, and then she's like, okay, the pushback is getting to the point where I need to do a little modification. And it doesn't seem to have hurt her career. But so in general, it's a word I say you have to wield with a lot of caution, especially if you're not in one of those Latin Caribbean environments where it's still very normalized and not as controversial, right? So I think, again, context matters. Context always matters. Culture matters. Grounding matters. If you're using it in the US context where you gonna get it's a rough word to navigate in a US Black and Black mixed environment. So people are like, I'm claiming pride in mulatto, blah blah blah. But if you use it, it's one of those words that if you use it in certain circles, you have to know you're going to get so much. You're going to get pushback, you're going to get hostility. And the reason is, one of the essence of the reason is, and we bring in colorism and classism now, and we bring in hierarchy, right? Which you all know. So because these categories, again, in the diaspora created by the transatlantic slave trade, there is no neutral term, really. And the hierarchy, the societal hierarchies were very stacked. Black at the bottom, white at the top. Closer to white you are, the higher you are, whatever the category is called, right? And so mulatto, in some ways, like Creole, in some ways in the US, has the same response, Louisiana Creole, is perceived by Black people. And in a Black conversational context, it's insulting. And it's a reminder that I'm of a higher status than you. Right. So again, it's a word that can be neutral in some countries and cultures and is a loaded automatic weapon in others. Does that make sense? So I think that if one's going to use it, and similar words, always do a little, be cognizant of the context, the cultural context, the historical context, the geographical history connected with all these identities and how we came to be what we come to be called. Because it can either just be, oh yeah, cool, mulatto, mulatta, or you're taking your earrings out because now you got to fight.
Yeah.
Or you're getting
Yeah.
dragged mercilessly online, which is today's version. Yes, I'm mulatto, and then the fallout that comes from that. But so I believe that it's to our advantage to be very, very cognizant of all these things. Is it a drag that we have to be cognizant of all these things? Sure, of course. It's extra labor, it's extra work. Nobody asked for it, nobody's getting paid for it, right? But I think that if you want to move through the world in a way where you're communicating about yourself, your identity, your background, your perspectives effectively, we got to understand that there's so much trauma, so many triggers, and you don't always know where they are. It's like stepping into a meadow and learning you're in a minefield sometimes.
Yeah.
And sometimes the word mulatto is a landmine.
Yes. And on that note, we're going to close up our round for today. Last invitation, if there's anything else that anybody wants to say or put in the chat, do it now. While we just say thank you so much for your time, for your wisdom, for your guidance. Thank you for your voice and everything that you've brought to the conversation today. I'm so glad that we're able to that we're moving this into the world and around the world so that people can mirror and model you and have real grounded, tangible, nuanced conversations that are actually intelligent and effective and productive. So that's my closing word. And we will see you on all the platforms and continue to be in community, and we'll come full circle.
Thank you. You are amazing. The work you do is phenomenal. And everybody, please remember to find ways to share and tell your truths and your stories, because all of it matters, all of it's needed, and all of it will help move all of humanity upward and forward. I thank you so much. Swirl Girl.
Yes, Swirl Girl. Oh, yeah. 2 things. First of all, tell us, where can we buy Swirl Girl? What's the best way for us to buy Swirl Girl?
Thank you. Thank you for asking. So I have an independent African-American publisher, Alchemy Media Publishing. So I don't know if there's a way for me to get these to you. You can go on Amazon, and I know Amazon, whatever, but it is on Amazon. Swirl Girl is on Amazon, easily available. If you want to avoid Amazon, I will find a way to share the link with you all, or somehow a way to share it or you can just Google, TaRessa Stovall, Swirl Girl, and Alchemy Media Publishing. That's the independent African-American publisher I work with here in Atlanta. And you can go directly to their website and order if you want to skip Amazon and not give Jeff Bezos any pennies.
Okay. That's great to know. Thank you. I just put it in the chat also for those of you who are here and TMS support, the Amazon link in the chat. One additional piece of information. Oh, is this for Europe too? Good question, Nina. I think we'll have to click and try and see if Amazon, I'm sure Amazon will probably deliver it to Europe.
If wait a minute, if you're in another country and you can't get it on Amazon, hit me up. Hit me up. I'll work with you personally.
Okay, great. I wanted to make y'all aware of one event that's happening. It's called the Multiracial Changemakers Summit. A lot of you might have seen it on Instagram, seen Haley advertising for this, but it's a virtual month-long experience, all of May. It's an experience for mixed and multiracial people focused on leadership, identity, community, and a lot of the other businesses and leaders that we follow and admire will be hosting sessions. So there's career coaching, there's conversations around navigating identity and power, and registration ends on April 30th. And we are a community ambassador. So if you decide to sign up and buy tickets, put Lily Stiefel in the little box, and then she'll know that y'all came from our recommendation so that we can continue that collaboration. That would be really helpful. And if you have any questions about it, please let us know. We're happy to give you more info. What we've been sharing on our stories, and it's on our feed as well. So that's the last thing I'll say. And if anybody else has anything to say or ever wants to reach out to me, DM us. I'm always on our Instagram, and my email is lily@themixedspace.com. Simple. First name, mixedspace.com. So that's how I'll end. And we'll close our stage here, or I'll leave the stage and the stage will stay open. And we'll see you all soon.